One of the keys to a profitable medical or dental practice is to be smart on overhead costs. They're significant and sometimes are difficult to find. If you don't understand your overhead costs, or if you feel like you're working harder for the same compensation, then this is an episode you're going to want to listen to. I'm Carl White, principal at Market Advisory Group, which is a healthcare marketing agency, and I'm also the host of Practice Care. The mission for both is the same, and that's to help private practice owners stay private. It's usually what they want anyway, but care is better when the provider is at the top of the heap, making both clinical and business decisions. Sometimes they're intertwined. Let's keep it simple, keep it private, so that all those decisions can stay in one place. My guest today is Joe Lessard. Joe is a partner at Professional Business Management, which is a healthcare practice management and accounting firm in the Northwest Chicago suburbs. Joe has been with PBM since 2009 and a principal since 2020. He has attained designations as a certified public accountant, health practice advisor, and as a certified healthcare business consultant. Joe believes in rolling up his sleeves and is usually on site visiting his clients' operations firsthand. He's responsible for all accounting and payroll services, as well as personal and business tax returns for his clients. He helps them review operations, including overhead costs, among other things, and day-to-day aspects such as HR, employee benefits, retirement plans, collections, billings, and patient interactions. Every client has different needs, and that's why Joe's commitment to his clients' needs and his customer service is what he prides himself on. Joe, another returning guest, welcome back to Practice Care.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, and so we're going to start at a familiar place. There's always new listeners. Help us get to know you better. That was a very sort of PBM and you, but fill in the gaps. What do we know about you?
I am a principal of professional business management. We are a healthcare consultant firm here in Chicago or outside of Chicago. We're not your typical accountants. We are really in your office and really talking to you about the business side of your practice and helping you, really throughout the year. A lot of our clients, we meet with them 9-10 times throughout the year because it allows us to collaborate and be proactive versus just talking once or twice a year. Because there's a lot of stuff that comes up, such as overhead costs, that if we're just talking once or twice a year, there's really no guidance or help that we can give. So that's why we really believe in the model of being on site, virtual, but really meeting throughout the year many times.
Right. And the firm's been around since what, the 30s, right? 1930s?
1932. Yeah, we're on getting close to 100 years.
Well, you look wonderful.
Thanks.
But, you wear the age well. And you are, I mean, really healthcare. What proportion of your client base is a practice of some kind, would you say?
Yeah, I mean, good question. The landscape of healthcare is changing always. When I first started many moons ago, I would say most of our clients were in the medical space. And with the consolidation with hospitals and groups, that has certainly changed the medical side of things. But in dental has facing its own sorts of challenges with these groups, these DSOs. So I think as a firm, we are probably pretty 50-50, maybe 60% dental, 40% medical, but it's pretty darn even.
But overall, like, for every 100 clients you have, how many are one of those or a healthcare practice as opposed, my point is you're very concentrated in healthcare.
Oh, all we do is healthcare. That's it. Medical, dental, vet, that's all we do.
Right.
I mean, the only time we ever deal with something else is because it's the doctor's side business or something like that, or other investment.
Right.
99% of what we do is healthcare.
Right. So you know what you're talking about when it's costs or otherwise.
We know the landscape. Absolutely.
Right. This isn't just sort of a generically given advice here. So good. So let's get into it. Overhead costs. What are the main overhead cost, I'll say, categories or costs in a typical practice? Let's just make sure we're all talking about the same thing.
Absolutely. So the way I'll take a step back for a second. So the way we produce our financial statements for our clients, we don't just take kind of the QuickBooks in A to Z categories. We try to group them, and we try to group them so we can help our clients make better decisions. And what do I mean by that? So we tend to group all of the personnel costs, wages for anybody, payroll taxes, employee benefits, retirement plans, and that's really generated it's grouped into one category for personnel.
Okay.
That is and always will be the greatest cost of your overhead for your business.
Okay.
It just always will. And the percentage of that changes depending on your specialty, of course. But yeah, your personnel is going to be your main cost.
Okay.
Your facility charges, your rent, your repairs, maintenance, your utilities, that sort of thing is also going to be up there. And again, that is dependent on what you are investing in, right? If you are investing in if your office is in some sort of industrial space, or if it's in a big office building or medical building, your pricing per square footage is going to be a whole lot different than a retail storefront. And so, those tend to change. Or if you're in the city, Chicago versus the suburbs, a lot of that can change.
Sure.
And again, depending on your specialty, your professional supplies are a big one too. You are buying supplies and more or less remitting it to the patient. You're buying any sort of that tends to get confused with your kind of a cost of goods sold.
Right.
Right.
Those are different?
It's kind of the same thing.
Kind of same thing. Okay.
It's the same thing. But again, if you are in a specialty that has a lot of cost of goods sold, or that could change. That could be a big expense. So your professional supplies, again, any drugs or vaccines you're purchasing, remitting to patients. Any lab expenses for a medical practice or a dental practice, that should be a large expense as well. Then we have a couple other categories, but those are I would say are the main three ones: is your personnel, your facility, and your professional supplies. And again, like maybe the only other one is under professional expenses. Malpractice can be a big expense too.
Sure. Okay. And maybe I missed it, but like, what about equipment? I think about some dental practices, lots of equipment. Is that part of facility or is that separate?
It depends. Usually those are capital expenses. So those are treated separately. That's not considered an overhead item. If you are leasing something and it is truly a lease, that can be part of it. But most of the time it's a disguised lease. Like you're paying the same amount every month, but it's really you're purchasing it.
Okay. So you sort of previewed this, I think, maybe without meaning to, but the question is, what are good versus bad levels? And at one point you said, well, it depends on the specialty for one of those. So how do we break this down? Maybe if you want to pick a couple of examples, I'm not sure, but okay.
So the easiest one to compare or to model, because we tend to work with a lot of general dentists. And it's pretty much a bread and butter for kind of the percentages.
Okay.
I would say a good level of overhead for a general dentist is going to be somewhere around 60 to 65%.
So all those categories added up together.
Correct. So the way I try to simplify it. So for every dollar of revenue you bring in, 65 cents goes towards running the practice.
Okay.
And the categories of that, usually your personnel, again, is going to be your main component of that. So for every dollar you bring in, about 25 to 30% or 30 cents of that's going to go towards paying your staff. 7.5% is about the range for your facility charges. And then the rest kind of go down from there. But if we're saying 60 to 65% is your overhead and 30% is your staffing and 7.5% is your facility charges, that's half of your overhead right there.
Yeah, it is.
And if you're, again, depending on the specialty, your professional supplies lab, that's 10%. We're already there, 47.5% of that 65% right there.
Most of it, yeah. And in the staffing cost, are you counting the owner in that, or is that a separate?
It is. We strip that out as separate. So any revenue generating providers, again, mainly the doctor, either the doctor owner or the associate doctor, are treated. We strip those out because essentially what we try to do is the way our financial statements are broken down. For example, we try to see, how much is available to a revenue generating provider? How much is available? So if it's an associate, two associates, or one doctor doing the work, how much is available to the doctor?
And right now we're talking about that other 35%. That's the starting point.
Exactly. Yeah. So
Okay.
for every dollar you bring in, let's call it 65 cents goes towards running the practice. The other 35% is available to the doctor.
Got it. Okay. So keep going. So you start with the associate and then keep going from there.
Yeah, again, so again, that's the whole premise of it is just trying to figure out what your overhead costs are. And again, 30% is kind of your personnel, 7.5 is facility, 10% potentially your professional supplies. And so on an average, a general dentistry practice is going to run 60 to 65%.
Okay.
That has changed over time. All those pre-COVID or post-COVID temporary changes are not temporary anymore.
Right.
Inflation has changed a lot of costs across the board. So those, the same dollar per, it costs more for that same unit,
Mm-hmm.
XYZ than it ever has.
Mm-hmm.
Staffing is the biggest change.
Yeah.
Not only minimum wage, but everything has just gone up.
I was going to ask, like 5 years ago, was 60 to 65% more like 55 to 60% or?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it
Yeah,
was.
it's gone up
Okay.
5 to 10% on average.
Okay. So does that mean that the top line has not gone up, or at least the reimbursed rate?
That
It's kind of
that
an obvious question, or
that is the hardest part
yeah.
for most businesses in this world. If your costs go up, you charge more for your fees, right?
Yes. As the day we record this, just to place people, the tariffs have been announced, and depending on who you listen to, it's going to ripple through or it won't or whatever. But
Yeah,
but they have the freedom. Like there's whether it's a good move or not separately, but it's different in
absolutely.
the world you and I are talking about where
Mhm. Yes.
yeah,
And
yeah.
the reason of medical, you're contracted with every insurance under the sun.
Hmm.
And no matter if you charge $1,000 for a procedure or $1,200 for a procedure, doesn't matter. That's a
Yeah.
made up number, more or less.
It's
And
it
the
is.
insurance contract is going to tell you, nope, we're going to reimburse you $600.
Yeah.
So you can charge more, but it's not going to matter.
Yeah.
You have to contractually come adjust off to their agreed upon fee schedule.
Yeah.
And the same thing goes with dental. But medical is more
It is.
stuck in a lot of ways for most of what they do. And I think we've talked about this before, Carl, is trying to find other ways that
Hmm.
are outside of the fee schedule to make up for revenue,
Yeah.
okay? And charging, aesthetics or some sort of other procedures or other sort of
Hmm.
ancillary items
Hmm.
that you can have a little more freedom in what you want to charge.
Yeah. You've got a couple of spare rooms, try to do something productive with them that
Right.
makes sense. That's more cash pay and outside of insurance.
Exactly. And
Yeah.
with dentistry, some of them have a little more flexibility and going what we know in the industry is called fee for service.
Hmm.
And you are a little more, they have a little, I'd say a lot more freedom
Yeah.
to choose which insurances they want to be in network with.
Yeah.
And as your practice is in existence for a long time, you build up your reputation. We advise our clients to start scaling back on who you're in network with.
Yeah.
You can charge that 1,300, 1,400, $1,600 for a crown and get
Hmm.
reimbursed 100%.
Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. It's the top line is a big deal.
Yep.
So scenario, you take on a new client and their overhead costs are just out of whack. Let's kind of I'll ask the top level question, we can break it down. Where are good places to start? Like is it different for everybody? I imagine it is. It's like,
Yep.
maybe you'd start to bite off. Because I imagine look, one, we have to mathematically get the ratios under control, but two, there's behavior change. I think of a former provider who would he told me I buy top of the line everything, supplies. And I would just say to myself, well, I would never know. I mean,
Mhm.
maybe you don't need to, and then complain about the economics of the practice. But like, but it was like this pride. So there's behavior change also. Like, how do you could probably look at the books rather quickly and go, oh boy, we have to change some things. So how do you break that down and sort of get people on the path?
Yeah, I mean, certainly there's a lot of competition out there for buying supplies, and certainly, don't be married to just one vendor.
Hmm.
Don't be afraid to shop around.
Hmm.
That's the world
And
we're
I
in.
just pick supplies as a random
Hey, no,
example,
that's a
but
great one. That's a
yeah.
great one. If you're used to going to one vendor, shop around.
Mhm.
Absolutely. Um, you could be used to getting your gloves and uniforms, but they keep raising their fees, and go elsewhere. Look around.
Mhm.
Now, if you're really happy with the quality and you feel like it's unmatched, that's worth its weight in gold, right? You don't have
Mhm.
something you don't have to worry about.
Mhm.
But yeah, absolutely. Don't be afraid to shop around, explore, review it
Mhm.
every so often.
Yeah.
Work with a healthcare real estate agent that can help you negotiate your lease.
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
one, I was talking to one just recently, and I've been, like they're in the hospital, and so they pay a premium to be in the hospital. So
Mm.
when they're on call, they can just take the elevator, right?
Mhm.
But they pay a premium for that, and they have a
Mhm.
big space. And as you're getting closer and closer to your expiration of your lease, I encourage all my clients to talk to these guys
Mhm.
because it can really save a lot of money.
Yeah.
Either A, in your monthly, they can renegotiate your rates to pay a lesser monthly amount, or or incorporate some sort of what's called tenant improvements. So the landlord gives you money to improve some space,
Mhm.
your space. But
Mhm.
yeah, use people that really know the healthcare space is fantastic.
Yeah.
It
Just
doesn't
on
cost.
that, there's like this default almost reflex. It's kind of repetitive, but because, most people's experience with real estate is their own home, residential, whether it's an apartment or whatever, which typically goes up, and it's hard to negotiate. There's some differences with commercial real estate, and those things can be negotiated. And so you're totally right. Don't just take, anyway, keep going, but
And the good
just
thing
to
about
plug
that,
that.
it doesn't cost any client.
Yeah. You hire somebody to
It is
negotiate on your behalf, the
free.
landlord pays. The
It
landlord
is
pay, you pay not a penny.
free. And
Yeah.
it sounds too good to be true, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But here's the way I try to equate things to what makes sense in the real world. If I have a realtor and he or she is showing me a house, does that cost me anything? I have no idea in the landscape nowadays, but
Yeah. Well, it's true.
generally,
Formerly,
no,
no. Yeah.
right? No.
Yeah.
Same thing here.
Hmm.
Um, uh, look at simple things. I mean, patients don't pay by cash anymore, or very little, or
Hmm.
check. A lot of it's credit card.
Hmm.
The credit card processing fees can vary quite a bit. And
Hmm.
the way they vary is depending on the type of credit card, number one.
Hmm.
And I don't want to go into chapter and verse because I don't know as much as some vendors that I work with.
Yeah.
If you swipe a card versus you pay a higher percentage versus you're inserting the card, or you tap the
Yeah.
card, or you take a
Yeah.
credit card over the phone, that's more costly. Again,
Which is so crazy, but it's true. You're
they're
right.
trying
Nobody
to
thinks of
weigh,
these
they're
things.
charging more for higher risk.
Yeah.
And the more secure, the more guaranteed that payment is, the lesser your charges.
Hmm. There you go. But
Uh,
nobody would think of that. Like it's just, I'm
it's
just taking a credit card. Why does it matter which way I take it? Well, it does.
Yep.
Yeah, it does. What about when you
Snap.
get into people? Like, so, the
Yes.
big, like that's everything we've been talking about is I'll say easier, relatively speaking, even if they're not so easy. But now you come into a new client, you look at their overhead cost or their staffing costs, you go, oh boy,
Yep.
this just can't continue. Like, how do you break that one down? How do you get going on that?
Yeah. Unfortunately, the
'Cause this is
industry
hard. This is people. This is people.
this is the hardest thing to navigate because the industry dictates what you should pay them,
Hmm.
right? I'll pick on my dentist. Hygiene. Hygienists are the rates for them keep going up. And I
Hmm.
think they tend to plateau a little bit here. But in the Chicagoland market, it was going 50, 60, some, depending on how competitive you got to be, $70 an hour.
Wow.
And what, and everybody knows this, you're not getting reimbursed $70 an hour for that cleaning. And
Wow.
so you are breaking even or losing money for each one you do.
Mm.
Um, but it's a necessary piece of the puzzle.
Hmm.
So how do you compensate for that? And I don't want to say compensate paying $70 an hour, but how do you
Hmm.
compensate for the need of having that work being done?
Because cost has to give somewhere else in the personnel line.
Right. And
Yeah.
it's being a little more strategic. And so, hey, can you have somebody else doing that work at a lesser rate, but that requires you to do more work.
Mhm.
So some of my dentists are now having dental assistants do some of the work.
Mm.
And depending on the specialty, depending on the state, some dental assistants can do a lot more, and depending
Mhm.
on their level of training.
Mhm.
And so but that just means that the general dentist has to spend more than the 5-10 minutes with the patient. Maybe they have to spend 15 minutes with the patient.
Right. Right.
And so there's a way for you to mitigate the cost of having to pay a hygienist $60 an hour, $50 an hour, when you can
Yeah.
pay your dental assistant $28 an hour, for example.
Yeah.
Looking at your schedule, how optimized is it?
Mhm.
If you are paying, and I hate to be this way, but if you're paying people to sit around, you're not optimized. And
I think of our family practice, and over the years, it's slimmer at the front desk. I'll say there aren't as many people, and it's a lot quieter.
yeah,
It's just because there aren't as many people, and so yeah.
again, there's a need, and depending on the practice, of course, to have enough people for proper coverage in case people are sick or whatever, maternity leave or
Hmm.
whatever. There is absolutely a need for that.
Hmm.
But maybe they don't need to be full time. Maybe they can be part time, and they would be happy with that.
Yeah.
Again, it's just trying. You got to be flexible, and you got to really look at your schedule to find out what is needed to operate your practice.
Hmm.
And we love to do that. We love to look at the practice and see, okay, what's your schedule look like? How far out in advance are you booked? What is this? What do you need to really run this practice?
Hmm.
And personnel, again, is the biggest thing.
Yeah.
And another way that we can help mitigate costs, we recommend clients to mitigate costs, compensation is total compensation.
Yes.
It's not just how much you're paying them on an hourly basis.
Yes.
And the reason I bring this up is because, the total compensation, and we advise all of our clients to go with, when you're giving your employees a review every year, it's not just the $25 an hour,
Hmm.
right? It's how much in paid time off are they getting? How much in
Hmm.
holiday are they getting? How much in health insurance, dental insurance? How much in retirement plan benefits are they getting? What does that total compensation look like for them?
Yeah.
Um, in a lot of times, staff, the younger the staff especially, don't have a full appreciation for the total benefits. They want
Yep.
money in their hands, right?
Yep. Yep.
They're, the 3%, 5% you're putting away towards their retirement is 40 years away from
Yeah.
that. They're not
Yeah.
thinking.
Thanks, but you're right. It's forgotten.
But it's important to potentially offer that to your staff,
Hmm.
but you got to do it with educating them of why it's good for them,
Hmm.
and working with a financial advisor that can help educate your employees on that,
Hmm.
is important. But here's the
Yeah.
reason I bring this up, and maybe you are now paying more for your staff because of that.
Hmm.
We recommend starting up a retirement plan, because who gets the lion's share of any sort of contribution? You, the owner.
Hmm.
And so while, yes, maybe that is adding more towards your overall overhead costs, which is the exact opposite of this podcast here.
Right.
But when we're looking at keeping your potentially the hourly rates down, but still compensating them with the retirement plan or these other fringe benefits,
Right.
might have any extra benefits towards you.
Yeah.
So it's okay to spend more if it gives you more benefits potentially.
Right. Right. And another thing is, I'm thinking back to an episode that we had at least 2 years ago as a pediatrics practice in Texas. And he said, we'll never pay the most. And we don't have to, because quality of life, culture, very necessary, soft things, but very
Yeah.
necessary. And frankly, the smart people on staff will realize it, and probably the ones you want to keep. And so they're getting paid well, just not wellest,
Yep.
and you avoid the bidding war. And the other benefit is training costs go down, people know things better. Another thing I wanted to say is, you were talking about, why are we doing it this way? Is everything optimized? Then you start to look at that process over there. Why do we do it that way? Is there any way to make that more efficient? Why are we doing it that way? And sometimes you can find things in there as well, and depending on the specialty, there's some practice management systems are getting, frankly, better and better at piling on more and more ways to do things differently. Scheduling is one. Open up your schedule, let people self-schedule. You and I were talking about this the other day. I don't do anything in my personal life till 8 o'clock at night, and I don't know a single doctor that I go to that's open at 8 o'clock at night. And so, can I just schedule myself?
Good segue, Carl. I think, again, if there's, AI is the biggest thing right now.
Yep. The Wild West, but necessary.
It is everywhere, and it is crazy. It's the best way I can. It's scary.
Yeah.
It's crazy. What can be made available. If your practice management system, or if there's a system out there, and there are, that can help help you authorize patients' benefits, and so at time of service what that patient's responsibility is, so you don't have to have a staff calling their patient's insurance. You can you can do a lot more of those versus having someone do it, right? So that's a way to help use technology, use AI to help minimize your staffing costs. You pay a little bit more in the product cost or the software cost, but in the end, you're going to save money.
You are.
It's using technology to potentially find ways to make your system better. There's a lot of them out there that will automatically, again, send text reminders to patients. So you reduce the ability for no-shows or scheduling. Or software out there that automatically gets reviews for patients. So you don't have to do it or pay your staff to do it. There's a lot of stuff out there that can help automate things for you. You pay for it, but in the end, will help reduce your staffing costs. Because again, staffing cost will be and has always been the biggest part of your overhead.
Yeah. And anything that's a repetitive process or procedure is ripe to go looking. Is there a way to do this? In an automated way. So perfect. Yeah. Something I've come across is it just seems like, I don't know what your experience is, but having a handle on your overhead costs. I come at it from marketing, and I always say to a prospect, so have you thought about a marketing budget? No. And I just wonder if it ripples through to maybe when you're picking up clients, you're starting out with them. Do they tend to have a handle? Do they not have a handle? And how are they getting by if they don't? It just seems like counterintuitive to me, but this is my mindset, not their mindset, so it just seems like you're playing with fire if you don't.
A lot of them have an idea of what the industry, quote unquote, standard is for overhead.
Okay.
Depending on their specialty, right? General dentist, again, 60-65%. Medical practice, maybe a lot higher, depending on the specialty, right? I have a surgery practice, it's a lot higher. Why? Because their malpractice is crazy high, but they get compensated other ways. An endodontist is going to have a much lower overhead percentage. It really depends on the specialty. So that's really, they know those, but they're not, a lot of practices don't really monitor, or they're not really monitoring the actual costs of that. Because again, they're not looking at, hey, can I buy this equipment from this vendor instead of this vendor? They'll do some of that, but not really. They're more focused on the top line.
Yeah.
And when I say the top line, I mean revenue.
Yeah.
And here's the reason why. A lot of your costs, in essence, are fixed. You're paying the same around about total facility charges. That's not changing.
True.
You are literally paying the same rent every single time. Utilities will go up and down a little bit, but virtually the same. Repairs as needed.
Yeah.
Right? Your staffing will change potentially. The busier you are, more staffing you need, but for the most part, it's kind of fixed. There's some variable aspects of that. Your office expenses, your general catch-all, your junk drawer of expenses, that's not changing. Your malpractice isn't changing. really the only pieces that are variable in nature of your overhead will be your professionals expenses, your lab, your supplies. The busier you are, the more you're going to use that.
Fair enough.
The busy and personnel. The
Yeah.
busier you are, the more staffing you're going to need, or more
Mhm.
staffing you're going to have. Those are your only variable costs
Mhm.
for the most part.
Yeah.
So, because most of your expenses are fixed in nature, there isn't as much emphasis on trying to mitigate those expenses because again, industry has told you what those are going to be.
Right.
And so the best way to reduce your overhead percentage, and I didn't say dollars,
Percentage, raise your,
percentage,
yeah, raise your revenue.
raise your revenue.
Yeah.
Because overhead percentage is take your overhead dollars divided
Yeah.
by your income dollars.
Yeah.
And so, well, how do you focus on changing your income in a world where you are contractually stuck, right? With your reimbursement rates in a lot of ways. Well, it's finding, again, either other ways to bring in additional revenue. And then when I say that is either ancillary services that are potentially outside of the contractual fee schedules, or optimizing your schedule.
Yeah.
Are your hygienists, are they spending more than an hour on an appointment? Well, that's too much. And you can try to scale that back down to 45 minutes. Now you can fit another hygiene appointment for every 4 you see.
Yeah.
That's increased. Your expenses hasn't changed.
Yeah.
You're still paying the hygienist the same. The same rent, you're paying everything the same, but now you got an extra appointment in.
Yeah.
It's optimizing your schedule and making sure you are seeing what you can and when you can.
Yeah. Maybe it's the other way of saying the same thing. I thought you were going to say there are some people out there who just look at their checkbook balance at the end of every month, so to speak, and they say, well, it's not red. So I guess I did well, which just seems dangerous, you know.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, again, that's why we meet with our clients on a regular basis to kind of go over the ins and outs, and they generally have a feeling if things aren't going the great, because again, they're using their checkbook balance to gauge the health of their practice, and that's part of it, but not all.
Right. And have you had clients where you've looked at them and said, you got to cut staff? Like,
oh yeah.
Yeah.
Fine.
What's a good way to get going on that? I'm not on the conversation, but again, because that's you're talking people, like it's
a hard conversation to have. You know, we are human. We are, I'm not, we're not just business-minded people. We are human. We try to understand the dynamics of that office because, as you mentioned, culture is so important. And that is more valuable than the hourly wage you're paying them. It's the culture, it's the stress level, the camaraderie you have with your staff, all important.
Yeah.
But sometimes there are difficult decisions that need to be made.
Yeah.
And if you have been in the history of raising your front desk staff 5-10% every year, and now they're getting paid $40 an hour, that's not what the market's paying.
Yeah.
And they've been there for 20 years, and that means something, but either A, you have to scale them back, which never goes well.
Yeah.
They're used to a certain lifestyle. Or find them a different role to justify that compensation. Maybe they've grown into some sort of management or supervisorial positions. I can justify that a little better.
Yeah.
Or you have to make the difficult decision to part ways because it doesn't. At the end of the day, you have to make money to continue seeing patients.
Yes, you do. You absolutely do. Well said. As always, you covered a lot of ground. A couple of questions just to kind of get us to the finish line. Given that context, is there anything you think we should have touched on that we didn't get to?
No, I think again, the biggest impact you will have on your overhead is revenue. It really is. Because again, to some extent, your overhead costs are really fixed, and there's only so much you can do to trim the fat. But you got to be aware of what you're trimming. Don't don't cut off an expense that can potentially save you money.
Mhm.
You're just not utilizing it properly.
Right.
You don't cut off expenses for people that are helping you
Mhm.
potentially, that can help you.
Right.
Um,
So analyze them, look at them,
yeah, again,
make judgments. Yeah.
you can't just blindly say, oh, I'm paying too much in advertising, or I'm
Mhm.
paying too much for, not to pick on you and me, I guess,
Yeah.
for my accountant, right?
Yeah.
Or
Right.
my attorney, or
Yeah.
whatever, right? My cleaning people. If you are getting quality help,
Mhm.
and they're helping you potentially in analyzing or help guiding you, and they are a resource, they're a first stop for a lot, or they're helping you get exposure, and you can see that that work is being translates to butts in a chair, or you're getting patients in.
Right.
Those are valuable things.
Mhm.
So just don't blindly just compare industry standards and start cutting costs, and
Mhm.
uh, seems like what our government's doing these days. They're just cutting costs just to cut costs. You got to
Mhm.
make sure you're cutting the right costs.
Yes. And which means looking at them first. And two practices
Yeah,
might look at what's right versus not
absolutely.
right differently, but
Every practice is different.
be
Every
thoughtful.
single one.
That's right. Be thoughtful. Um, so the other wrap-up question is, so let's say we've caught a listener's attention. They're starting to think like what you were just talking about. They've never looked at them before, or they're just wondering. It's a big topic. This isn't something you do on a Friday afternoon at 4. I think I'm just going to get my overhead under control today.
Yeah.
Where do you get started? How do you get started? I mean, my thought is get an accurate picture if you're not sure you have one. Is that, I mean,
Get some history. Again, if you have been in business for a while, your practice has been around, let's look at some history. Let's look at
mhm,
the history of the past few years, see what you've been spending. And
mhm,
again, not just an A to Z listing of your chart of accounts, but no, it's categorize, it's group them together to figure out what you're kind of spending in each of these categories.
mhm,
And we can then compare it to industry standard. Again,
mhm,
a similar size practice, what in revenue and number of people, what does that look like? Are you
mhm,
spending the appropriate amount? If
mhm.
not, then you start to dig into those areas.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think another one is look at an area where maybe it's a little bit lower hanging fruit, like the software you're using or the supplies, maybe certain categories of supplies. And you could say, you know what, let's call up a couple of reps and just
Yeah.
see. Let's just see. We don't have to make it. We're not committing to anything, but what else is out there? It's good to have options in life. This is the same way. But start to get a handle on it and start to see what your options are. I think those are good places to start.
And it doesn't have to be this daunting task, right?
Yeah,
If you start thinking of the mountain, you will never climb it. If you
correct.
take a step,
One step.
pick one thing,
Yeah,
start.
yeah, yeah. And you might say, you know what, I need all these people. I love them. This is the way it's got to be. All right, then try to find it somewhere else.
Yeah.
And yeah, so perfect. Joe, thank you very much once again. We're going to have you on more, as you know, more times this year, but these are really great topics, necessary stuff, and hopefully some listeners benefited.
Well, I appreciate you having me and glad to share any knowledge I have.
Absolutely. And you provided contact information, which we're going to get into the show notes. So anybody who wants to contact Joe now has another way to do it. A couple of points before we wrap up. First, if you're someone like Joe or us, you serve private practice owners or you're a private practice owner yourself, and you've got some experience on the business side you think others would benefit from, tell us about it. Come on Practice Care so we can share your knowledge with the world. In the show notes for Joe's episode and every episode, there's a link, couple of questions, super fast. Just tell us what's on your mind and we'll get you scheduled as soon as possible. And finally, if you haven't done it yet, subscribe to Practice Care. Please, Practice Care is one word. Apple, Spotify, YouTube, you name it. We're easy to find. There's a new episode every week, and that's the easiest way to get them is to subscribe. Thanks very much, and until next time.